listener production.
Hey, Helen Smith here with you. Welcome to The Briefing. Christmas is just around the corner and many Australians are hitting the shops or prepping big Christmas lunches packed with meat, salads, seafood and more. But once the feast is over, how should you store the leftovers?
Any of those chilled, ready-to-eat foods that you're not going to cook will be considered to be the highest risk because you're not cooking it, and so what you're actually purchasing and what you put on the plate is then what's going to go in your mouth.
If you're planning on saving those Chrissy leftovers, here are the do's and don'ts to avoid getting sick. That's coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Listeners Newsroom. It's Monday, the 22nd of December.
Good morning, I'm James Lake. More than 20,000 people gathered at Bondi Beach last night for a powerful Hanukkah commemoration only a week after the terror attack which claimed 15 lives there. The Light Over Darkness event honoured victims and celebrated resilience in the Jewish community. While New South Wales Premier Chris Minns received a standing ovation, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was booed and even confronted by a man shouting "blood on your hands" before police were able to intervene. Now it comes at the same time as the PM's approval rating has plunged to its lowest since the election. A new Resolve poll out this morning shows 46% of voters think the government's handling was weak, and concerns are only growing about racism and anti-Semitism. The Red Cross says nearly 50,000 Aussies have come forward to donate blood or plasma in the past week in the wake of the Bondi tragedy. And money experts say interest rates are almost certain to increase twice next year, with the first hike coming as early as Feb, as the RBA fights stubborn inflation sitting at 3.8%.
Thanks to the Listener Newsroom for those headlines. Now it's time to get into our deep dive on food safety this holiday season. Christmas leftovers are arguably the best part of the holidays, but how many times have you found yourself wondering, can I still eat that? Well, it turns out hospital emergency departments in Australia usually see a significant increase in food poisoning cases over the Christmas and New Year period. So how can we make sure our leftovers don't go to waste, but also don't make us sick this year? From freezing and storing food correctly to the sniff test. Cheryl Hughes is a food technologist and runs a consulting business called Facts on Food. Cheryl, why do we see a rise in food poisoning cases over the Christmas and New Year period?
I think probably because there's a lot of entertaining, a lot of activity. People are at home more. They've got a lot of food, usually stacked in their fridges and their pantries, and they don't necessarily think about the right way to handle that food, how to cook it properly, and then how to handle it if it's going to be chilled or reused or reheated later.
Okay, so we're going to get into all of that so we make sure we are handling it well. But I want to know, how long is too long to leave food sitting out on the table before it goes from, the yummy Christmas feast to potentially food poisoning?
You want to keep the time as short as possible, really. Fazans have got a great guideline called the 2-hour, 4-hour rule, and that's designed mainly for food businesses, but consumers can use that rule too. Basically, up to 2 hours, if the food has dropped below 60 or has increased in temperature above 5, so it's sitting in what we call the temperature danger zone between 5 and 60 degrees, a maximum of 2 hours, and then you can put it in the fridge. But people lose track of time, so I think the best way to handle all that food is if you've finished eating, you're sitting around the table chatting, just get it off the table, cover it, and put it into the fridge, and that should be the best way to handle it.
So what are some of the highest risk foods that we should be keeping our eye on first?
Anything that's classified as a ready-to-eat food. So you might buy it from the supermarket and you don't do anything else to it. So oysters, cooked prawns, ham, cheeses, all of those salads as well. There's a lot of prepared salads that you can buy in the supermarket. So any of those chilled, ready-to-eat foods that you're not going to cook will be considered to be the highest risk because there's no kill step, there's no heat treatment, you're not cooking it. And so what you're actually purchasing and what you put on the plate is then what's going to go in your mouth.
And how should we be storing our food, particularly our meat? There's a lot of talk about a ham bag. Are we meant to be using one?
Lots of people use them. I use them at Christmas time. I've got a handbag that I usually buy a fresh one every year, but I do have one that sort of a really, really good one that I keep in the pantry that I have washed after I've used it and put it away. Anything that is a refrigerated food needs to be kept and stored in the fridge. So that would include all your meat, seafood, poultry, your salads, all of those sorts of items. Storage is really, really important. You never store raw foods above cooked foods or ready-to-eat foods. So the storage bin that's in the bottom of most fridges, you can use that for storing your meats that are raw and keep them in there separately, safely, so that they're not then a contamination risk to the other foods that are in your fridge. And then with the handbag, follow the instructions that's actually on the handbag. I usually, because it's fairly starchy when you first, buy one, you take it out of the bag. I usually give it a really good rinse first and then follow the instructions. There's information on there to use cold water and usually white vinegar. Make sure that you make it up according to the information that's on the bag. Give it a really, really good soak and then squeeze it out so that it's damp, but it's not sopping wet. And then your ham can go in there outside of the packaging. Your ham can go into the handbag and then you store it in the fridge. And again, not below anything that's raw. It needs to be stored because it's a ready-to-eat food. You're going to eat it. So, but handbags, they're very popular and sold in all of the supermarkets. And as I say, I use one every year, and I've not had any issues.
So how long can we leave our leftover cooked meats, maybe from lunch or dinner, in the fridge before we have to throw them out?
If you've got a really good operating fridge, you've chilled it properly after cooking, you have it covered and separated. A rule of thumb would be no more than about 48 hours. That's typically what's used in the food service industry, is known as the 48-hour rule. So you're talking about 2 days, but it really is going to depend on how long it was sitting around. Was it cooked and chilled properly? Lots of other factors like that. So it's very difficult to say as an absolute certain, but the 48-hour rule is a good guide that's used in the food service industry.
All right, and what about some of the sides? You mentioned salads there before. What about salads or potentially other veggies that might have been left over?
Again, if they've been put back into the fridge very quickly since you had finished serving them and the meal has finished, follow the 48-hour rule. However, if you're using those bagged salads or pre-prepared salads, the date code for the usage is actually on the packaging. So make sure that you make a note of that. And because we all take the packaging off and we'll put it into our own serving dishes and put it on the tables, it's a good idea. Pen and pad at the side in the kitchen. Make a note of what the use by date was on those items that you're using, because they're ready to eat foods. Then they have a use by date, and you shouldn't be using them past that date code.
And rice and pasta can seem pretty harmless, but why are they considered such high risk foods when it comes to getting sick, especially when you're reheating them?
And it's not nice either. I've had food poisoning from rice that was not stored correctly in a restaurant, and it's not nice. Rice and pasta have a bacteria associated with them called Bacillus cereus, and that organism, when you're cooking your rice and your pasta, will be destroyed. The live organism is destroyed. But it also has a spore that can form in the food, and that spore will survive the cooking process. Then if you don't store your cooked rice and pasta correctly, so you're storing it, it's still warm, it's in a larger container, the middle of it, the outside might cool if you put it in the fridge, but the middle of it stays really warm. And that allows the spores to then germinate and grow. And they cause food poisoning because they produce a toxin or a chemical as part of their life cycle. And it's the toxin that actually makes you sick. It's heat stable. So even if you reheat that food, you'll still not destroy the toxin, and the toxin will then make you sick. And it's not nice. It's a very quite a quick onset of symptoms, and not pleasant at all. And I mean, no food poisoning is pleasant, but Bacillus cereus food poisoning in particular, I say I've been a victim of that many, many years ago with a group of friends in a restaurant. But yeah, it's really the handling post-cooking that is the issue with rice and pasta, because rice and pasta dishes are quite popular for using in salads and other dishes that you might be serving over, when you're entertaining. If you're cooking it first, when you chill it, put it into a container that's no more than 5 centimetres depth. And that will allow an even distribution of the food in that container and will help the cooling process. So you don't end up with a big, deep container and the middle of it staying really, really warm. So it's how you handle it post-cooking that is really, really important. If you're going to cook your pasta and your rice dishes and consume them straight away, it's not an issue. It's what happens to it afterwards. It's the leftovers and the cooling of it that becomes the issue.
And how about seafood? People eat a lot of seafood during this holiday period. What are the telltale signs that it might not be safe to eat?
It's a very interesting question because food poisoning bacteria don't spoil food. You don't know that they're there. So when you're looking at something, you want it to be as fresh as possible. So give it a look at it. If it's fresh fish, for example, and it's a whole fish, you can look at the condition of the gills, the condition of the scales, the eyes. If they're starting to look a bit cloudy or something is looking not quite right, don't use it. With cooked seafood like your lobsters, crayfish, prawns, those types, it's very difficult. So it's really a case of thinking about how have you cooked it, how have you chilled it, have you kept it in the fridge, how long has it been out of refrigerated storage. They're the things that you really should be considering, because you won't get any off odours if you've allowed the bacteria that may have contaminated it or may be present to cause an issue, basically.
And you mentioned cross-contamination before. What should we be doing when we're preparing food?
So always, if you're preparing things that are ready to eat, you should be preparing those. I would recommend prepare them first, because then there's no risk of you not cleaning a surface or equipment or chopping boards or knives or anything. So do your ready-to-eat foods first. And prepare them, wash your hands, use good hand hygiene, make sure that you've got clean utensils, clean chopping boards. Using different coloured chopping boards is a good idea, so that you know that if you're going to use cooked meats, for example, and you're going to be chopping up cooked meat, a brown chopping board is quite often the one that's used for cooked meats, green for produce and vegetables. So colour coding is really good if you're able to have multiple colour chopping boards. But yeah, it's really coming down to the hygiene, the handling practices. Wash your hands. That would be, number one really in making sure that you've got good hand hygiene and stopping touching other things before you then go and handle the food that you're about to cut up. Particularly if you've got other raw items, around, or never go from raw to cooked, because you're going to bring all of the bacteria with you from the raw food to the cooked food. And that's what cross-contamination is the movement of bacteria from a contaminated source to one that shouldn't be contaminated.
So when it comes to those chopping boards, you've got the colour coding, but what types of chopping boards should we be using, and is it safe to reuse certain chopping boards like wooden ones?
So there's a variety of chopping boards that are available out there that you can get in your supermarkets and some of the kitchen stores out there. The colour-coded ones are great because you can designate them for cooked food items, ready-to-eat food items, and then raw food. So typically a red one would be used for raw meat, for example. But once the board is showing signs of wear and tear, so lots of groove marks, cut marks in it, you really should be replacing it, because it does make it very difficult to clean. Chopping boards can go in the dishwasher. Dishwasher is great at cleaning and sanitising the chopping boards. But if it's showing signs of wear and tear, get rid of it. Wood really isn't a good item to be using in the kitchen as a chopping board, particularly if you're going to use the same board, and you see this happening. The same board is used over and over again for different types of food, so the risk of cross-contamination is definitely there. You can definitely get little bits of wood that come off that could become a foreign object in your food, but also the grooves and the cuts in them do tend to be quite deep. So they do become very difficult to clean, and they can harbour bacteria and food residue in there that will allow any bacteria to grow if it gets trapped. So wood is not recommended for use in a kitchen. It's very difficult to clean. Same with all your plastic ones or, the food safe Perspex type. They can also shred if they're overused and you see very deep grooves in them. So, as soon as you see wear and tear, get rid of it. As I mentioned before, the wooden ones can't go in the dishwasher. They get really sodden with water. They're not good. I don't have any wood in my kitchen for chopping boards. I've got different coloured chopping boards for different things and different sizes for different things. And as soon as it starts to show wear and tear, we just get rid of it and get a new one.
And finally, how can we reduce food waste and stay safe? So I'm talking freezing leftovers properly to making the most of what's still good to eat.
Again, it comes down to the handling and the storage. And freezing is really good, but you've got to remember, freezing doesn't actually kill bacteria. You get a little bit of a drop-off, but generally speaking, it's almost like it's holding them in suspended animation. So as soon as you thaw that food, they're going to come back into action again, back to life. So if the food has been left out for extended periods of time, you shouldn't be freezing it for then, further use. It should really be discarded. But we're all trying to minimise the amount of food waste, but don't take chances, don't take risks. If you think that it's been out there for too long, get rid of it.
Cheryl, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
No worries. Thank you very much.
That was Cheryl Hughes, food technologist from Facts on Food. And thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. Before you go though, if you could subscribe or follow wherever you're listening from, it's a really easy way you can support everything we do here at The Briefing. And you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Helen Smith. Catch you next time.